There was a woman named Emily who was completely obsessed with social media. She couldn't go a minute without checking her phone and scrolling through her feeds. She needed to know every little detail of everyone's lives and was constantly comparing herself to others. This obsession soon took over her life. She stopped spending time with her family and friends and instead focused all of her attention on her virtual world. As the months went by, Emily's addiction grew stronger and stronger. But then one day, strange things began to happen. Emily's posts on social media started to take on a dark and twisted tone. She shared disturbing images and cryptic messages that left her followers feeling uneasy. As her posts grew more and more sinister, Emily began to lose followers and her popularity began to wane. But she didn't care. The only thing that mattered to her now was staying connected to her online world. Then one night, Emily was alone at home browsing through her social media feeds. As she scrolled through her notifications, she noticed something strange. She was receiving messages from her own account, even though she hadn't posted anything. The messages were filled with chilling threats and warnings. Emily tried to dismiss them as just a glitch in the system, but the messages kept coming. They became more and more violent, until one night they told her to look outside. Emily peered out of her window and saw something too terrifying for words. A figure was standing in her front yard, staring directly at her. She couldn't see its face, but she knew it was there for her. Emily tried to reach out to her family and friends, but they didn't answer her calls or messages. They were all afraid of her now because of the things she had posted on social media. As her fear grew, Emily realized that her social media addiction had cost her everything. She was alone and vulnerable, with no one to turn to. And it was all because of her obsession with the virtual world. From that day on, Emily was never seen again. Some say that she disappeared into the digital world, consumed by her addiction. Others claim that she was taken by the figure that she saw outside her window. But no one really knows for sure. All that is known is that social media can be a powerful and dangerous thing, and that it can consume even the strongest of us if we're not careful. Once upon a time, in a small town nestled in the woods, there was a young boy named Jake. He was a devilish little imp, the kind of kid who took pleasure in tormenting his classmates and getting away with it. He spent most of his days on social media, spreading his venom and spewing hateful comments. But little did he know that one day, his actions would come back to haunt him. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night where the trees whispered secrets and the wind howled like a pack of wolves. Jake was particularly ruthless that night, targeting a shy and timid girl in his class. He posted cruel messages on her social media page, relishing in the pain and humiliation he caused her. But as he hit send, something strange happened. The lights in his room flickered and a chill ran down his spine. The air grew thick and heavy, as if something were watching him. Jake dismissed it as a coincidence and went to bed. But that night, he was plagued by horrible nightmares. In his dream, he saw a grotesque creature looming over him, its eyes filled with anger and hatred. It whispered something in his ear, something that made him wake up in a cold sweat. The next day, Jake felt different. He was no longer the arrogant and confident bully he was before. Instead, he was filled with fear and paranoia. He became obsessed with his social media accounts, constantly checking them for any sign of retaliation. But no matter how hard he tried, the strange occurrences continued. His phone would ring in the middle of the night, only to hear an eerie voice on the other end. Messages would appear on his computer screen, threatening him and his family. Jake was terrified, but he couldn't bring himself to confess his wrongdoing and seek help. Eventually, the creature from his dreams began to appear in his waking life. It would follow him to school, hiding in the shadows and watching his every move. Its presence became overwhelming, and he knew he had to do something to stop it. Jake turned to the only person he thought could help him, his victim. He apologized for his behavior and begged for her forgiveness. To his surprise, she was kind and understanding, offering him a way out. She showed him a website, a place where people who had wronged others like him could make amends. He followed her guidance, posting his confession for all to see. And just like that, the strange occurrences stopped. The creature disappeared, and he was finally able to live without fear. But the memory of that terrifying experience stayed with him for the rest of his life. And whenever he saw someone being bullied, he made sure to stand up for them, never forgetting the lesson he learned. For in the small town nestled in the woods, there are things that lurk in the shadows, waiting to punish those who do wrong. And once they have you in their grasp, there may be no escape.
I hope you enjoy the content I upload. If you like what I'm doing, why not think about clicking on the subscribe button to keep up to date on my uploads. Thank you all for the great support.
Jack was a man trapped in the endless cycle of social media, lost in the labyrinthine depths of his phone screen. He was addicted to the constant flow of notifications, the rush of validation from his countless followers and friends. But despite his virtual popularity, Jack remained a solitary figure, an outsider in the tangible world around him. One day, he stumbled upon the profile of a girl he used to know, a former flame who had broken his heart. As he scrolled through her pictures and posts, he felt a familiar pang of heartache and resentment rise within him. But as the days went by, his emotions began to curdle into something darker, something malevolent and obsessive. He started to stalk her online, bombarding her with comments and messages, desperate for her attention and approval. His addiction to social media consumed him entirely, a ravenous beast that fed on his every waking thought. Jack's life became a hollow shell, a digital prison of his own making. He stopped going to work, stopped leaving his home, stopped living altogether, consumed by the sickly sweet poison of his obsession. He fell asleep with his phone in his hand, unable to tear his eyes away from her posts. But then, one day, he saw something that shattered his fragile grasp on reality. A post with a tagged location, a chance to confront her, to make her feel the same pain he had felt all these years. And so, he set out, a man possessed by his own demons, a figure of madness and despair. The drive was long and tortuous, the roads winding through the dense forest, the sky a deep shade of purple. As he drove, Jack's mind raced with dark thoughts and twisted fantasies. He imagined the confrontation, the tears in her eyes as he finally made her feel the same pain she had inflicted on him. It was a sickening thought, but he couldn't stop himself. Finally, he arrived at the location, a desolate parking lot nestled among the trees. He got out of his car and walked towards the building, his heart pounding in his chest. But as he neared the entrance, he realized something was wrong. There were no lights on, no sign of life inside. Jack hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open, his heart racing with fear and anticipation. What he saw inside made his blood run cold. The room was dark, the walls stained with dried blood. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was a computer screen. Jack walked over to the screen and saw that it was logged into his social media account. He recoiled in horror as he realized what had happened. He had fallen into a trap, lured here by some twisted individual who had been monitoring his online activity. He was alone, in the middle of nowhere, with no one to turn to. As he tried to make sense of what was happening, Jack heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned around and saw a figure emerging from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with a twisted grin on his face. "I've been waiting for you, Jack," the man said, his voice cold and emotionless. "You've been a very naughty boy, stalking that poor girl online. But don't worry, we're going to have a lot of fun together." Jack tried to back away, but the man was too fast, too strong. He grabbed Jack by the throat and dragged him over to the table. There, he bound him to the chair and turned on the computer screen. "You're going to watch, Jack," the man said, his voice dripping with sadistic glee. "You're going to watch as I make her suffer, as I make her pay for what she did to you." And with that the man turned away from Jack and disappeared into the darkness of the room. Jack was left alone with his thoughts, his mind racing with 100 different fears and uncertainties. As he stood there tied to the uncomfortable chair, he could hear the muffled sounds of someone else in the room, a woman crying out in pain and terror. His heart sank as he realized that the man had followed through on his threat, that he was torturing the girl he had once known. For hours, Jack listened to her screams and cries, his mind awash with a terrible mix of guilt and helplessness. He had been powerless to stop the man from taking her, and now he was powerless to do anything to help her. But as the night wore on, something inside Jack began to stir, a flicker of something that he had thought long dead. He felt a surge of anger, of righteous fury, rising within him, a desperate need to do something, anything, to stop the madness that was unfolding before him. And so, with a strength born of desperation, he began to pull at his chains, straining against them with all his might. At first, nothing happened, but then he felt them begin to give, the metal links groaning and creaking under the strain. With a final burst of effort, Jack broke free, his body aching and battered, his mind aflame with purpose. He stumbled towards the door, his eyes fixed on the man who had brought him here, who had taken everything from him. And then, with a scream of rage and defiance, Jack launched himself at the man, his fists flying in a blur of motion. The man was caught off guard, unable to defend himself as Jack pummeled him with all his might, his rage and fury driving him forward. For a few moments, it seemed as if Jack would triumph, that he would finally have his revenge. But then, the man recovered, his own strength and training coming to the fore. He fought back with a viciousness that took Jack by surprise, his blows raining down upon him like a hail of lead. In the end, it was all over quickly. Jack fell to the ground, his body battered and broken, his mind awash with pain and despair. He watched through bleary eyes as the man laughed, a cold and heartless sound that echoed through the empty room. And then, as the darkness began to close in around him, Jack realized something important. He realized that revenge was a poison, a sick and twisted thing that would only bring him more pain and suffering. In that moment, he let go of his anger, his hatred, his need for vengeance. He embraced the pain and the sorrow, let it wash over him like a cleansing tide. And as he did so, he felt something new stirring within him, something pure and untainted, a glimmer of hope that he had thought long lost. In the end, Jack emerged from that terrible place a changed man. He no longer sought revenge, no longer craved the bitter satisfaction of making someone else suffer. Instead, he sought something greater, something more meaningful and profound. He sought redemption, a chance to make amends for the mistakes he had made, to find a way to live in the world beyond the darkness that had consumed him. And with that hope burning bright within him, he stepped out into the world, ready to begin a new chapter in his life, a chapter filled with light and hope and possibility.